Hello. So something that I've been interested in for years is current affairs and global politics. I say I've been interested in it. That doesn't mean I don't get frustrated by it at times, particularly with the behavior of certain totalitarian regimes, which that's for individual videos. Um, for the purpose of this video, I want to talk about a particular subject, which is how we define power, right? When we look at global politics, when we look at the power dynamic, um, because let's face it, countries are almost like people. They have groupings, they have allegiances, they have enemies, and with about 200 countries and territories in the world, I think there's always going to be some friendship, some alliances, some animosity, um, on some level, right? But there's also going to be competition and trade, and inevitably comparisons. So I want to have a little look at this, and lay out what I see as, or how I would define the way these rankings work, the way we look at global power, the way we judge, for example, how one country is more powerful than another. I think it's an interesting subject. Inevitably, it can be a controversial subject because people might resent their country being seen as weaker than another country. On the other hand, people in smaller countries. I remember actually when I was at university, my flatmate was an Austrian guy. Now, Austria is a wealthy country. And it's a modern country. It's a democracy, but it's a small country. And I remember him saying that he was pleased he came from a small country. I don't know what the context was. We must have been talking about the G7 or something at the time. But he actually said he was pleased he was from a small country. And that was an interesting answer. Whereas perhaps something that you might see more often in bigger countries, politically speaking, is a pride, a sort of nationalistic pride. Now, this is not to say that small countries can't have pride. Sometimes it might be pride from standing up to a bigger aggressor, and that's totally understandable. So I think there's what I would call powerful country pride and smaller country pride, to put it in a very sort of loose way, but it's pride in a different sense. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to get into how I see this. Now, just a disclaimer, if I happen to name your country in this, it's just my opinion, it's not set in stone, and I will rationalize each of these categories. And needless to say, no offense is intended. It's just a way to sort of exemplify what I'm talking about. I'm not suggesting, by the way, I've come up with these definitions. There is actually a Wikipedia article on it, but I more or less agree with the definitions as they stand, and I just want to kind of summarize them a bit. And yeah, so here we go. If we look at the very, very top of the scale, you have a superpower, right? So what is a superpower? What I'll do is I'll talk about the definition and then get into examples. A superpower is a country or state that has very strong dominance on a world level. It will be a country or state that has the most powerful military, almost certainly the largest economy, and will have significant cultural clout as well. It will have all those things, and it will be a country that the rest of the world pays interest in because of those things. At the moment, I think we only have one example, which is the United States. Now, people might say, well, what about China? What about Russia? Well, they would fall under rising superpower, which I'll go into in a minute. I still believe, despite all the problems it has, despite all the challenges it faces, as it stands, and since 1991, when the Cold War ended, the United States has been the sole superpower. Actually, when the term was coined in I believe, the mid 40s, just after World War II, there were three superpowers: the United States, the Soviet Union, and the British Empire, which was, of course, collectively an empire. Now, the British Empire, of course, we decolonized, countries became independent, the British Empire evaporated. Then the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. So I forget who it was, but there was a political philosopher who at that time said history is now over when the Cold War ended. Of course, that wasn't true, but it was an interesting way to look at it. I would say at the moment it's only the United States. But that gets me into the next category, rising superpowers. Now, this one is a very interesting category because it is kind of what is fueling the current dynamic of competition. And I think it's only China and possibly Russia. Possibly Russia. I would put Russia below China on the grounds that whilst Russia has significant military power and it's still it's a powerful country, it doesn't have the economic weight of either the United States or China. In fact, it doesn't even have the economic weight of the great powers, which I'll come into in a minute. So that's perhaps the area that Russia lags. Also, Putin's domestic power, I believe, is starting to slide. Um, so I put Russia third. Nevertheless, it's never a country that can be underestimated. Certainly, the power of their state outreaches, RT, and so on, remain quite significant. But yeah, China, needs no introduction. I could talk all day about China. It's a rising superpower and a very malevolent one at that. But we have to be honest, China is a powerful country today. It's the world's second biggest economy. Its economic growth has been, incredible. It's a powerful military, maybe not as powerful as they suggest, because numbers alone doesn't equate to power. And I'm not convinced that the average Chinese soldier has, for example, the battle experience of an American, Russian, or British soldier in that sense. So that's an area where China might actually have a slightly misleading facade, i.e., its military power might not be quite as significant as it first appears, because numbers alone isn't everything. It's also what you do with those numbers and how that is utilized. So, China will have these huge military rallies, which are very intimidating, and you know, um, I don't know if it's everything. Um, my point is, you can have smaller militaries that are actually more experienced. Indeed, like our military. This is not to say that the British military could defeat the Chinese military, but my point is it's a power dynamic, right? And it's not just about numbers; it's about capabilities. It's about the efficiency of weapons and intelligence systems and all the rest of it. But nevertheless, I would put China at number two. I do think it is a rising superpower. Within the next perhaps 15 years, it's scheduled that China might actually surpass the United States economically. When that happens, it will be hard to see an alternative other than the fact that China will at that point have reached number one position and be the world's number one superpower. Nevertheless, the United States will remain strong, and I personally think that what will happen is China will get to the top spot and it will kind of hold that for a while, but perhaps around the middle of this century it will subside again and the United States will regain its number one position, possibly. But that's, very low speculation. Now, the next category, like I say, Russia is somewhere between, I would say, a rising superpower and a great power. Great powers. This one is quite an interesting category as well. This, to me, is a country that is perhaps was a former superpower, like the United Kingdom and the British Empire, but has declined. Nevertheless, it still is quite a powerful country. This would be a country that has quite a big economy. For example, we think of the members of the G7, and this is a country that will have significant cultural influence as well. For example, and military capabilities. However, it doesn't quite have the same global clout as the superpower, which, like I say, is the United States. So examples of great powers would be the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Japan, probably Italy, Brazil. Um, yeah, they would be the countries I would suggest, and India. I would include India. Now, some Indians might say, well, we're a rising superpower. I would say yes and no. In a sense, yes, because India is very ambitious. But on the other hand, it does still lag quite far behind China. not in population, but in other areas. It doesn't, unfortunately, have the same weight as China. I say unfortunately, because I think Beijing is a malevolent. I would much rather India was in that position than China, but that's that. That's my own biases coming in as lover of democracy. Um, but I think that yeah, those are examples of great powers. So again, countries that have significant power, they have economic power, they have military power, and they can still pull a punch, but they don't quite have the power of the United States or China at that global level. Then we come to middle powers. Again, an interesting category. I would define a middle power as a country that's quite significant, has regional power, a country that is probably an advanced economy or at least a fast-growing economy, and a country that can have significant influence on a regional scale, but perhaps not a world scale. Another example of this might be a country that kind of has great power status, but it's overshadowed by close proximity to a superpower. So I would include in this category countries like Canada and Australia, which I both have a lot of respect for. But I would, particularly Australia, I think it is overshadowed in the Asia Pacific region by China. I love Australia. I think it's a great country, but I also think realistically they can't take on China alone. So in this sense, it's overshadowed by the rising superpower. Um, and it's only got 25 million people. It's a big economy. It's not in the top eight. Other examples of this might be Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Nigeria, South Africa, South Korea, Mexico. These are Argentina, I would say as well. These are all countries that they have a degree of power and influence. They can't be called small countries, but they don't quite have the same level of power, perhaps, as great powers in terms of economics. Nevertheless, they could easily become great powers. So I think that's an interesting sort of level to be at, and I think yeah, it's definitely an area to watch. The next category I would say is almost everywhere else, most other countries. Incidentally, I would also put a middle power somewhere like Sweden. In other words, a country that's wealthy, very developed, but doesn't have the same political power as, say, Germany or the UK. But nevertheless is a modern developed country. And then at the very bottom category would be a failed state, which unfortunately, sadly, is like Haiti. This is a country that has crippling poverty, endemic corruption, violent instability, perhaps civil war. Haiti, Afghanistan, countries like this, unfortunately, are failed states. Now, having said all that, um, I understand that there can be a risk of stigmatizing a country. It's almost like a ranking system, like blacklisting a country, and that perhaps is not the best thing to do. And also, there's differences within. So, for example, I put both Nigeria and Canada as middle powers, but clearly Canada is a lot wealthier than Nigeria. My reasoning for that would be that Nigeria is the most powerful country in West Africa. It's got regional power. It's the most populous country in Africa. I would say it's got a lot of potential, but it's not as wealthy as Canada, and it doesn't have the political stability of Canada or it's far more corrupt than Canada. So I'm not saying that just because I've put two countries in the same kind of bracket, I'm saying they're exactly the same. Not at all. Every country is different. I just think it's an interesting way to look at it now. Like I say, if you're from any of these countries and you object to this, I'm not saying it to be offensive. It's just my honest observation. Let me know your thoughts. I mean, where you're from. Um, I know I've got people from around the world. So again, I'm not saying this to be offensive and disparage any country. I don't look down on smaller countries, for example, just because they don't have the same economic and military clout as the UK. Um, but I would say that it's a case of, I mean, I'll give an example of this, right? Say you have a small European country like Slovakia or Estonia or maybe let's say Belgium, right? They won't have the same political power as Iran. However, When you check corruption, when you check human rights issues, etc., they're going to be well ahead of Iran. So there's a lot of ways to look at international rankings, and the United States doesn't even come out at number one in a lot of rankings when it comes to, for example, GDP per capita. The US is still powerful, but it's not actually number one. I think outside of Qatar or Switzerland or Norway. I think it's Qatar. The US is still big, but I think it's like sixth or seventh. In terms of crime, the United States lags well behind other developed countries. It's got higher violent crime rates than most European countries and Japan. Healthcare, it has world class healthcare, but not everyone has access to it. So America has challenges. Let's make no mistake about it. It has challenges. Um, and there's even risk of political instability if Trump continues to stoke things up. The storming of the US Capitol building was massively embarrassing for the United States because this is supposed to be the great lights, of democracy. And to have basically that sort of interaction happening, it's almost like something that would happen in a failed state. Um, that's why it was such an awful event. I mean, it's still quite incredible that that actually happened. It's almost like something from a film, or quite incredible. But that's my take on global power politics. I've ranked my own country as a great power, but that doesn't mean I'm sort of being pompous and jingoistic and saying, "Oh, we're better than everyone else." Great power, not in the sense of we're great, but that's the level. It's a we are a powerful country, and that's just the truth. We are, but we don't have the power of the United States, China, or Russia, which is why I think when we have mutual interests, we need to be united. Let me know your thoughts, and thanks for watching.